Welcome to the Athlete Insights Podcast, hosted by Yash Pad Day, a podcast focused on letting athletes tell their journeys in their sport. This podcast is presented by Boxed Water. Boxed water is better.
Welcome into another episode of the Athlete Insights Podcast. Today I've got my guest, Camille Lucas. She's the Assistant Athletic Director at Peru State College. Camille, I know it's 7 p.m. there, 8 p.m. here.
Yep.
It's a little later night, but I appreciate you being accommodating in that process. So,
Absolutely.
I like to go back and kind of start with where you started with sport and kind of work your way into where you are now. And so can you talk about your early experiences in sport? When did you really kind of fall in love with sport in general? And was that at an early age, or can you speak on those experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a big sports family. So from a very young age, I was around it a lot. My dad wasn't a coach and administrator. And then I started T-ball when I was 4. So really from the age of 4, I've been around sport. My brother played football at Colorado State University. And then I went to Northeastern Junior College. So if anyone knows Dalton Connect from the Lakers, he and I were there together at the same time. Went there, played softball, retired from softball, and then moved over to the University of Northern Colorado. But at my time at Northeastern Junior College, I worked with our assistant athletic director as her work study on game day management. So anywhere from ticket sales, setting up basketball games, wrestling matches. Watched her a lot, and that's truly when I fell in love with this industry. And I looked at her and I said, I want to be an admin. I want to be in her position, doing game day operations at the collegiate level. And I kind of followed in her footsteps. She also is a UNC grad, went in the sport management program. But that's truly where I fell in love with sports. So my undergrad was business. At the time, I didn't know I loved sport. And then really my senior year, I was like, I don't know. I don't want to do a corporate job. I don't want the 9-to-5 cubicle. And I decided to enter into UNC's master's program in sport administration. And then now I'm here at Peru State as an assistant athletic director. So that's, from a young age, I've been around sport, and then, throughout college, made those choices that this is what I love. This is my passion.
100%. You said you played softball at Northeastern, and did you play any other sports growing up? Was softball kind of your main focal point from the start, from the get-go, or what was your childhood in terms of sport like?
Yeah, so I grew up playing many sports. My parents wanted us to try everything, but softball was the one I fell in love with. So I tried soccer, I did dance, basketball. I'm a lifelong skier. I always sometimes forget that's a sport, but I do ski still to this day. And then in high school, just to do something in the springtime, I picked up lacrosse, which was really unique and fun. So always kind of been around sport. I will say I wish I did wrestling. I know women's wrestling is so popular now, but that would be one sport I wish I could go back and definitely try. But yeah, just tried many different things, but softball was definitely the heart and soul for me.
100%. And moving into your high school career, now talking about high school, can you speak on what was your experience like playing high school softball, and what kind of lesson did you take away from high school and playing sport in high school?
Yeah, so I did competitive softball alongside high school softball. So for me, I learned a lot how to manage my time. So typically I would have high school practice after school, and then I kind of would jump into my competitive ball right after that. So I wouldn't get home until 8 p.m. So managing my time, that included my studies, seeing my family, and all that good stuff. And then I also had, when I was 16, I tore my labrum. So in my right shoulder, I had a labrum tear, and I had surgery. I think that was the biggest challenge that I overcame. I got to see softball from a different perspective, more on like a coach's role, if you want to say, knowing the X's and O's, the nitty gritty of the sport. I learned how to do that, and I learned how, maybe softball isn't my whole life. And so I kind of realized how to balance softball at my time, which was work,
Yeah.
and my personal life, and have that work-life balance. And so overcoming that surgery, persevered through it, was able to throw again, which was a huge goal.
Mhm.
Kind of led into the two big things out of high school was time management and, perseverance with all of that.
I understand. Yeah. And you said throw it again. So I'm assuming you were a pitcher with softball in the high school.
You would laugh. I
Okay.
was not. So actually in softball, the way the shoulder lands and that underhand motion is very natural for the arm. I was a
Um,
catcher, so all of my throwing was overhand, like a baseball pitcher, not exactly
no.
the same.
Okay.
But it was
Yeah.
a very unnatural movement. I mean, all the time I'm throwing back to the pitcher on every pitch,
Mhm.
and doing throwdowns, my arms getting, exhausted.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was getting the overhand throw, surprisingly.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that's when you said throwing, I just thought of the pitcher, and so that's where I didn't, and I now I realize I'm like, yep, they do throw underhand softball wise. So no, it's great in that regard. And you talked about going to Northeastern Junior College with our pal Dalton Connect, former UNC
Yeah.
alum as well. But can you talk about your? I'm always interested in the people that I interview about talking about their recruiting process. Can you walk me through that and kind of talk about kind of how you ended up at Northeastern Junior College out of high school and your recruiting?
Yeah. So it was very interesting. I had that injury in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so recruiting, I was very late in the game. I was going into my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so at that point, I kind of talked to my brother, what is the best way for me to be recruited since he went to Colorado State?
Mm-hmm.
He said camps and then start emailing coaches. And so he was actually the one that told me about Northeastern Junior College.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just reached out to them. I did a camp, toured the campus.
Oh,
But I also did that with two other places. So I was looking at Colby Community College in Kansas.
okay.
I kind of got to know the coach because he saw me at a competitive softball tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So talked to him. He was talking to a couple of my teammates,
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually was looking at Ottawa University, which is around Lawrence area. It's a NAIA school, and I had a former teammate go there. So
Okay.
kind of through small networking, where those two um, didn't love it quite as much as NJC,
Okay.
um, but I kind of took the initiative and essentially got myself recruited. I just, stuck my
Mhm.
name out there. I'm going to go there. And then you asked about my transition from NJC to UNC.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that? What was that?
Um,
What was that like in that process?
yeah. So a big thing that came out of NJC, I wanted a small classroom size. I wanted a smaller school. That was
Hmm.
really important to me, a smaller community. So during that time, I looked at Fort Lewis College down in Durango, Colorado. That's actually where my dad went to school.
Okay.
Went there, toured there, and then I went to Mesa in Grand Junction, Colorado, because they're
Yeah.
D2, smaller setting.
Yep.
Um, Toured around and then came to UNC. And um, I don't know really what it was, but it just felt like home,
Hmm.
to be quite frank. The tour guide, I think the tour guide did such a wonderful job showing campus, showing what campus life was like.
Hmm.
Um, and I actually remember walking through the doors of the campus recreation center, which I worked at for 4 years, and seeing she was my later to become my supervisor, and
Yeah.
kind of making that connection to her. Really, said, I kind of know people at UNC. It's
Hmm.
close to home. They have small class sizes,
Yeah.
but they kind of had the big sport. They had football, they had volleyball and basketballs that I was still interested in watching as a student. So it had that big life college feel, but really came down to the small class sizes, and it felt like home. Great people at UNC, and
Hmm.
everyone's always proud to be a bear.
Oh, 100%. I hear that
Yeah,
the time. You know, once a bear, always a bear, right? So
always up there.
it was great. I mean, I know we met through the class through our sports sales class at T8 4, and
Yeah,
I knew you from there. But like I said, I've always enjoyed my time out there, and I miss being out there now that I'm not there.
me
So
too.
I miss being back in Colorado now that I think about it. So you know, made a lot of good friends, and UNC was great in that regard. And when you think about, I want to go back to the transition from high school to NJC, and when you think about high school softball and your experience playing high school softball and at the junior college level, what is the difference in maybe the style of gameplay or maybe how the game is played at the high school level versus you'd say at the collegiate level or the junior collegiate level?
Uh, yeah, I would say even, I think that high school to college transition, whether at your junior college NAIA Division One, it's a much faster game.
Mhm.
And that's what I was not prepared for. Um, Granted, I was at a junior college, so I'm only playing with 19, 20-year olds, maybe 21.
Yeah,
Um, if you go for your institution, you're now probably competing against 24, 25-year olds.
yeah.
The game is so much faster. I think there's so many situations, and it's not this, hit the ball, you go to first base. You're constantly thinking, you know, do I need to make that throw to home and get that out so we win?
Mm,
And in the game right then and there, or do we, that kind of strategy. And then I think the other big part was I wasn't the only talented player. We're
yeah,
all really talented.
yeah.
I think that was the big key. And so, like I mentioned, I was a catcher for my career. My
Mhm.
freshman year at NJC, there were spots open in the outfield, and I took it. I took an outfielder spot. I played there majority of my freshman year. I was the backup catcher, which worked perfectly for me. So,
Yeah.
but I kind of had a transition to where am I going to get playing time? And so
Mhm.
I made that sacrifice that as much as I love catching, I can be the backup catcher, but
Yeah.
I'm going to start in the outfield because I want to be a starter.
Mhm.
And so I think that those two big things, it's a much faster game, and then you're not the only talented person there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's you know, and that's the great thing. It's a gift and a curse, you could say, in that regard. Primarily a
Yeah.
gift in that, like, yeah, like at the high school level, you might be the best out of your high school, group. But, you get to college, like you said, you're playing against 24, at least for your institutions, you're playing against 24 or 25-year olds. Now I just read Miami's tight end. He got like ninth year of eligibility because of transfer
Yeah.
portal.
Yeah.
He's 28 and he's playing against guys that are 18, like 10 years younger than him,
18.
which is wild.
It
So
is.
that is wild. And so can you, and then obviously you go through the master's program at UNC and you end up at Peru State College. Can you walk us through kind of what your as an assistant athletic director? And I know you talked about how you're interning with game day operations and the assistant athletic director at NJC and kind of that got you involved with it. Can you talk about your day-to-day operations, kind of what you do as an assistant athletic director at Peru State?
Yeah, so here at Peru State, we're an NAIA school, so on a smaller level. Um, and so a lot what I do, I would say, is the business admin work. So I'm getting all of our coaches' receipts. We have 13 sports, so I'm getting all of their receipts,
Mhm.
and I'm looking over their budgets. So I'm really close with accounting department, working with getting those processed, making sure cards are paid on time,
Gotcha.
making sure the correct amount, and
Hmm.
if football spends $10,000, it's coming out of football's account, and we have bowling here, so it's not coming out of men's bowling. So
Mm.
um, I'm definitely looking at our financials, not making really the financial decisions, but kind of the checks and balances for it.
So,
So that's a huge portion of my job. I'm also pulling reports in the fall. one for the federal level and then one for the NAIA level. And it
Hmm.
just, a lot of it relates to um, budgets and what
Okay.
our financial fiscal year looked like, including scholarships. So that's a big portion of my job. And
Hmm.
then, day to day is always different.
Yeah.
But the other big part is eligibility. So
Hmm.
I currently just wrapped up getting prepared for the fall of 2025 eligibility.
Hmm.
But I am kind of our compliance coordinator here as well, that second hat. So um, any transfers, any eligibility rules, anything in that NAIA handbook, I'm really that first person to go to. So
Sure.
right now, as season's ending, I'm looking at men's basketball. We just ended season.
Hmm.
I'm looking if, this student has another year of eligibility because of COVID, or if they're done, or do they have, so at the NAI level, you have 4 seasons of competition
Yep.
to complete in 10 full-time semesters. So at
Hmm.
some point, an athlete will cap out either at semesters or at their seasons. So
Yeah.
I'm also checking that to make sure, do they have another year, but maybe they ran out of semesters. So
Hmm.
and then I would say my evening hours, it's going to be helping out on game days. Right
Yeah.
now, it's super quiet. We just have baseball and softball going. But during the fall, it's really busy. The month of October, we have volleyball, football, men and women's basketball going on. So
Hmm.
my evenings are very much consumed with, you know,
So,
being the admin on duty and kind of just helping out where things need to be, making sure visiting teams are here, officials are here, if
mhm.
there's any crowd control. So
Gotcha.
overall, there's a lot of different things, but that's kind of my day to day.
Gotcha. Sounds like a great. You're getting a lot of great experiences during your time there at Peru State, and so it's good to get to see that process. And before we end the podcast, I always like to ask guests 2 questions. Number one, what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten in your career, in your athletic career, or now your administrative college admin, the start of your college admin career? What's kind of the one piece of advice that stuck out to you that somebody's told you?
Yeah, I think it, kind of goes back to UNC's master's program from all three professors, especially Dr. Morris.
Mhm.
Networking, it is a small industry. The sport industry, as many options as there are, it's really who you know.
Mhm.
Um, and so my big piece that I always harp on, that I'm always trying to excel at, is networking.
Yeah.
Reaching out, making sure I'm keeping contact with you, professors, some of my former classmates, and then people that I've met throughout the sports industry. That's a huge thing, is building that relationship and making sure to stay on top of it, whether that's through LinkedIn updates,
Yeah.
or a personal phone call or an email. It's networking.
100%. And when you think about, and I'll put you on the spot, ask you what the advice that you've gotten, but I really want to use the platform, podcast, all this stuff to really, help out young kids and kids coming up and elevating that stuff. And so want to ask you if I want you to imagine if you're in a room full of young girls, young women who want to get into sport, who want to aspire to get to the level that you're at as a collegiate administrator, whether it's NAIA, D1, wherever they may be. What's one piece of advice that you would provide young women, young girls who want to get to your level, good to get to the spot that you're at and kind of want to have the success that you're having?
Yeah, I think it's very simply put, it's confidence.
Mhm.
This industry, especially sport, you see it's heavily dominated by males, and there's somewhat of a reason for that. The work-life balance
Yeah.
is kind of more suitable on the male, and especially for young women or women in general who want to have a family.
Mhm.
You know, the mother kind of takes a step back.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's confidence. I think that would be the big piece. And then advocating for yourself, advocating for that work-life balance. I've done it for myself. I don't have children yet, but I'm setting boundaries,
Mhm.
saying, nope, I can't do tonight's game. I have something going on.
Yeah.
And so setting those boundaries from the very beginning, that your time is sacred, that personal time, even if I'm going home and doing absolutely nothing, I have every, right to go do that and maybe not be at a cheer competition
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah.
Um, and then confidence, like I said, you're in a male heavily dominated career. Walking in with confidence,
Mm.
being strong and firm in your decisions.
Yeah.
I've seen it here. Um, if you're not confident in your decisions, a coach will find a way to break your point or kind of, go the roundabout way
Mhm.
to get something done. And
Yeah.
so it's being firm. I had that, 3 weeks into my job. I had to tell our football coach, your starter is not starting. He's not eligible. We can come back to this at a later
Mhm.
date. And it's short, brief, but you're not going to, push me around. So confidence,
Mhm.
um, and then boundaries, setting
Yeah.
boundaries, advocating for yourself.
Yeah. And it's, I love that, right? The only way you could achieve in anything is if you have the confidence and the wherewithal in that. And then also, like, when I was younger, when I was doing internships, I made that mistake. I'm glad you said that with the boundaries, right? I made that mistake quite a few many times where I would just work, 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 and then you kind of come home, you're tired. Next morning, you're like, we gotta go back and work, work,
Yep.
work, work. And so having that personal time is so important for physical health, for mental health, for so many different reasons. In that, so I'm glad you said that in that process, and appreciate you on that. So, but
Yeah, absolutely.
that's all the time we have for this episode of the Athlete Insights podcast. Camille, want to thank you for coming on. I know later in the evening, but want to appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and your insights and into your journey and where you've been. And I'll have your social media handles up on the video on YouTube, on Spotify, so y'all can follow Camille's journey at Peru State and what she's doing there. And then you can follow my podcast on YouTube, Google Podcasts, anywhere you get a podcast, you'll find this one. So again, Camille, I appreciate you taking the time,
Yeah, absolutely.
and we'll see you next time.